All right, perfect. I'll call the meeting to order at 7:11 p.m. I believe because we're hybrid, we have to do a roll call vote. So start with the folks in the room. With Scott
Here.
Mark
Here.
Mark Loring, Carrie Early.
Here.
All right. Glenn. You're on mute, Glenn. Sorry, man.
Here, sorry, I thought you meant from culture.
It's all good. And Selena.
Here.
Sean will work here. Perfect. So first thing on or second thing on our agenda, we do that every meeting, is citizen speak. So reserve the first 15 minutes of the meeting. We ask that you keep your commentary to 3 minutes and also state your name and your address. So if anybody's is here for citizen speak or would like to speak, if you would, please use the raise your hand function. All right, not seeing any. Next on the agenda, essentially old business, similar agenda items that what we had last time. So item 3A, land swap items, which are the appraisals, the alternative analysis, and upcoming meetings. So similar to last time, we'll start with the appraisals. I'm working with the town to get cost evaluations for all the land parcels that we had in the swap. So we'll have the appraisals ready for them. I'll need to get an RFP, hopefully by, my guess is not our next meeting, but the following meeting after that. So probably sometime late July, early August, we'll have, numbers, hopefully a proposal on that that we can vote on. But as far as appraisals, just open it up, see if anybody has any questions, comments, or anything like that.
We have to do an RFP in order to get the appraisals done. Is that what you're saying? What's the RFP?
I'm not sure. So that's one of the things I'm working on, because the cost that we got previously for the appraisals was roughly $35,000 to $50,000. And that was before we added the additional land behind off Randolph Ave. So I'm assuming it's going to be more on the higher end of that, so 50 to 60,000. So once it gets into those dollar values, my guess is there might be some type of RFP requirement for that. Like we'll hit some threshold financially that will trigger it. So that's one of the things I'm working with, with town administrator Nick Milano. Yes. Pretty straightforward. The alternative analysis is essentially a document that highlights all the different parcels that we're aware of that we looked at leading up to the land swap. St. Mary's of the Hills, Farm Pond, all the parcels that we did. So again, that's kind of a working document I'm working on right now. There's no real format for it, so it's just basically utilizing a report template I have in my company and just using that for the narrative, put the drawings and stuff in there, basically assemble an entire package. That's part of the documentation along with the appraisals that we submit to EOA, and they essentially use that as part of their review that then they use to basically, they don't approve the land swap, but they just advise Senate Council on it and stuff like that. So in regards to the alternative analysis, again, any questions, I'll open up to anybody. Folks online, just keeping an eye on them. Yeah.
What's the timeline for completion now? We just need it by about the same time as the appraisals.
Yeah, so they're all going to merge at one point where we have to submit that. There's really no hard deadline on it, but it's on us to, it's on me right now to get that stuff. The quicker we get it, the quicker we get up to EODA, and then the quicker they can review it and then advise Senate Council. The other part that we have to do that I'm working with, this really doesn't fall on us, it's on town council, is they have to draft special legislation that then gets submitted. And that's part of item 3A3, meeting update, which is we're trying to have meetings with Senator Timothy and Representative Driscoll to give them kind of a prep on, what we're preparing and what we're doing.
Do we know about when it gets the EOEA, how long they need to review? Is this like a 60-day?
No, I can ask about that, but I don't know. The good thing is they're very familiar. They've done 2 site walks with us, so they know, it's not like this is hitting them blind. So they're pretty familiar with all the sites, except for the ones we added behind Gower Road, behind Randolph Ave. But I don't think those were ones they requested us to look at. So I think they'd be pretty happy when they see that we put them into the equation.
Like from the ultimate timeline, what are we guessing we need EOEA approval by in order to move the project forward? Because I assume we're trying to get, if we have a plan, right, this particular parcel that we're going to need funding for, we're going to want to do that in the next town meeting in next spring, or the one in December.
Yeah.
Move to December, what's the
timeline for, so just going back to your original comment, so EOA doesn't approve anything. So they're not the ones that approve it. So they'll make recommendations to Senate Council.
Yeah. They
essentially advise people that when this goes up for, so it has to pass a 2/3 vote at state level.
Mm-hmm.
For it to pass the 2/3 vote, legislatures or representatives might ask, Senate Council for like the Cliff Notes version of what they're voting on and stuff like that, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And that's where EOA provides that to them, essentially as here's everything that's going on in Milton for that. The timeline for when that goes up to the state for that vote, I don't know. So that's my goal is I'm trying to get the appraisals up and done probably by September, along with the alternatives analysis, and get all that into EOEA.
Because the legislature, I think, usually, right, they submit their bills in February.
Mhm.
Is this a bill that would need to be submitted within that same timeline? Is that, maybe it's, you don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, this is all new territory for me.
Is that something that EOEA could answer, Timothy would know?
That's
when we have the meeting.
Yep, and that's part of having the meetings with them to find out, for them to educate us a little bit on the timeline.
So we still won't quite know what the EOEA's approval timeline is, and we don't quite know what the Senate approval timeline is. But if we assume,
One correction,
sorry,
no approvals from EOEA.
Sorry, you're right. I keep saying that.
No, it's
But
good.
Essentially,
I
we need
got corrected.
EOEA to finish a review of it in order to provide feedback to the Senate. So it's not an approval, but it's
That's correct.
essential review.
Yeah,
So,
so the timeline on that, I'm not sure about, but I can look into it and kind of report back at our next meeting. Because it is something I want to make sure that, for example, navigating internally within the town to get all the approvals that we needed, the first, when we did it in 2022, it gave me a kind of better idea the next year around of what to line up to hit for those approvals. This one, none of us have ever done. Town council, the firm that he represents, has lawyers that have done Article 97 land swaps before. So they're the ones that can kind of guide us along for that stuff. So I can talk to them about that.
I wonder if the senators can help shuttle this through the system too,
That is the
and
hope.
advocate for us.
That is the hope.
Yeah, if we have to follow the bill timeline, which is when sometime mid-February, assume we then want to give EOA at least 60 days, maybe 90 days to review, even if they're familiar with this, just given how slow state agencies are.
Yep.
So what does that put us? That puts us January, December, November. So,
End of November.
yeah, that kind of worst case, best case, we can give it to them sometime October, beginning November,
Mhm.
the rough guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ones I want to start hitting on a little bit too, because for us, just essentially an overall project timeline of deliverables we need to hit to make sure we're in line with everything where we need to get to with the state and everything. Because I would hate to, for example, if this needed to be drafted and submitted in February, theoretically,
Mhm.
and we missed that and then had to wait till next February, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why, like, my goal right now for the alternatives analysis, and at least for the appraisals that we're doing, I'm aiming for essentially September, give myself the summer to work on that stuff.
Only other question that's
Yes, sir.
only
Fire away.
tangentially related to this, the vote, the land swap vote that we took, and didn't the town clerk have to submit that vote to submit that to anybody at the state? And so
I think that's
then-
part of the overall paperwork. We
Yeah.
have to submit the appraisals, the alternatives analysis, a record copy of the vote, of 2/3 town vote.
Gotcha.
So so what happens is the Article 97 land swap, they passed new legislation or a law last year that kind of outlines it a little better. And I believe there's an online portal for all the documentation that you have to upload. So that's one of the meetings I had leading up to this with town council and town administrator, was to look at that portal, figure out what all the check boxes are, assign responsibilities. So town council has to do some, town administrator has to do some, and I have to do some.
Yeah.
I have to resurrect that meeting again with them. And, my takeaway at that point from the initial meeting we had was the alternatives analysis. So that's why I know that's on my radar to do. But that's one of the upcoming meetings too I want to have with them, just to kind of refocus everybody again, now that we've kind of gone through town meeting.
Gotcha. Okay. So there's nothing that at this point needed to be submitted based on that.
No, it's an entire package that will go in. Any other questions? No, go ahead. I appreciate all the questions. Dive right in, because it gets me thinking on some stuff too that, might be off my radar and stuff like that too. So Mike Zulis has just joined us. Sorry, just keep an eye on the waiting room.
The alternatives, are you going all the way back?
Far back as I can go. So,
Yeah. Tim probably has a lot of that information though, right? He was kind of checking a lot of the original properties out.
yeah, him and Betty were.
Okay.
So leveraging that was some of the public records requests that went on prior to the land swap. There was a lot of records requests for what sites we looked at previously. So we already have all the sites. For me, it's just trying to, like, right now it's an Excel spreadsheet and some PowerPoint slides. And for me, that's not acceptable to submit to the state for a thing. So what I want to do is kind of get a consistent kind of narrative documentation behind it and why it didn't work. So it basically lays out each property in a similar format of why we looked at it. Here's the property, here's the overall map of everything. Here's why it didn't work for us. And then, we'll lay those all out, as many of them as we have, to show the state, like, because we have to show them we've exhausted all options and stuff like that. That's coming back in.
There's probably just a handful of questions that we could put against each one that eliminates most of the properties pretty quickly.
Yeah, size being one of them.
Yeah, acreage being the first one.
Hey, Mike.
You're on mute, Mike.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm late.
no, that's fine. Just
Did I
making
miss-
sure.
Did I miss anything interesting?
No, so we were just talking, and you might be able to weigh in a little bit too, for the documentation that we have to submit to the state, you know, the alternative analysis, the parcel, it's called the appraisals, thank you. You know, do you know the overall timeline of when we need to have those up to EOA?
Well, you know, I think, I don't know the exact timeline, but I think the answer is as soon as possible. Right? Because, you know, the sooner we get the process, the sooner we have them, the sooner the process can continue. So, so I'd say as soon as possible.
Yeah, and then what Mark was doing, you know, because that was kind of my response too, of like, for me, I'm looking reality of probably in August, try to get an RFP or the appraisals contracted out. So that way we can get that going, because if you recall, the cost on those were probably like $30,000 to $50,000. So my goal on that is August at some point to get that going.
Mhm.
The other is the alternatives analysis for all the parcels that we looked at. Essentially getting a report finalized essentially by early September, basically give myself the summer to work on it, and also give, you know, this committee an opportunity to kind of review it and comment on it.
Mhm.
So what Mark was doing, you know, with those two kind of benchmarks there was, at what point do we have to, does the state have to submit the special legislation for the vote, and trying to work backwards from that? His assumption was February.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you know, we're all going through this process for the first time, right? But my thought was that EOEA is really drives the process, and in conjunction with, you know, our reps and senator, and because they'll have to file it. So so I think, you know, I think Senate as we understand, Senate Council looks to the EOEA Council to kind of drive the process, but we need to make sure that our senator and reps are you know, obviously working in concert with that.
Yeah, the other one that I mentioned too is Peter McNulty, that works with Kevin Freitag, has also executed Article 97 land swaps before too. So I'm going to try to reach out to Kevin. There was essentially meetings that I was having with Kevin and Nick, just preparing, you know, what documentation we need to do and when. So that's one of the meetings I'm gonna try to get going again.
Yeah, I think, Sean, to your point, just like the sooner we can create a timeline that gets us through the approvals and to town meeting, right? Because I assume we're gonna need to do something related to the school building committee, probably, or want to do something at the next town meeting. Just like, what is that kind of next year timeline look like?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to, so in regards to the next town meeting, which is the fall, which will probably be in December, I believe. I don't think there's anything school building committee related that we need to get articles for.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was thinking the
Yeah.
next spring one,
Yeah.
the next one in April, because I don't think we're gonna be able to get anything done in time.
Yeah.
Obviously, the next thing we need to do at town meeting, right, is get funding eventually.
Correct.
Once we have finalized.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions we're on agenda items 3A, which is land swap items. So just open it up to, again, anybody else. And if not, if no questions or comments, we'll move on to the next one. Good. Perfect. All right. So 3B is, professional services. So we talked about this last time, and again, it was more of a brainstorming effort for everyone for, and this is in relation to the Guile Road property, hiring an architect, an owner's project manager to do cost analysis, and then any other subsequent professional services or design items, traffic, water runoff, stormwater runoff, and stuff like that. So in regards to that, just following up with everybody essentially from the last meeting to see if there's anything else related. Nothing?
No.
Okay. All right. All right. So I think with that one, if there's nothing else left. So with that, we're basically completed with agenda items 1, 2, and 3. At this point, we'll be entering into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21A6, to discuss the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, which is Blue Hill Ave and the 676 Brush Hill Ave. So-
Sean, if I may, Sean,
Yep,
did you discuss this with Kevin?
he did not get back to me.
Okay. Because I'm not sure that, I had a quick discussion with him. I'm not sure that we need to go into executive session for this.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, because, I mean, when the AG's office came back, they said, it would have been okay to go into executive session it was okay for us to be in executive session for private property as opposed to the public property. They suggested that we do a bifurcated executive session. But Kevin suggested to me that out of abundance of caution, he's not really sure that we need to, even for the private property. So,
Okay.
I mean, based on that, I don't think if we're not going to talk about, prices and all of that, if we're just going to talk about feasibility, I'd suggest we stay in open session.
I am totally fine with that. I was just following the lead from, I actually
Yep.
copied directly from select board agenda just for that.
Yeah, it's what the AG's office, told us to do. But Kevin said, out of an abundance of caution, you might not need to. So
I'm fine with that. Yep.
And I meant to have him talk to you, but I just haven't had the bandwidth to connect you guys. So.
No, that's all right. So perfect. So I'm assuming with this being an agenda item, we can just still talk about it, just not in an executive session.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
I think what we're going to do, I think it's on the agenda, but we're not voting to go into executive session for this agenda item.
That works.
As long as it's accurately described on the agenda, and it seems to me we can talk about it.
Yep. Okay. So perfect. So what we want to do is talk about the property. As everyone's aware from our last meeting, the 2 parcels that are on situated between Brush Hill Road and Blue Hill Avenue. So at our last meeting, we kind of looked over the parcel at a very high level. Glenn Hoffman, who's the architect on our committee, offered to lay out some spaces on there just so we can kind of get a better idea for the property, what a potential educational program would look like on there. So Glenn, are you okay taking away, share your screen, show, kind of walk through the layout?
Do you have it ready to share, Sean, by any chance?
I can pull it up. Yep.
And I can just talk. Let's say why Sean's looking that up. Ironically, I tried some other programs we've looked at in the past for schools and other schools I've worked on, and they didn't fit well on the site at all. Ironically, the Guile Road site, if we straighten out the building, we can fit it on there, but you're gonna see there's not a whole lot of space left over on either side of the school, potentially, for roads, play yards, etc. Let me see.
Coming up right now, Glenn.
There we go. Yeah, you can see that there's two slides. One has the early childhood center kind of skewed from the main building, which is kind of what you want to break up the building. That's not going to work, obviously, with access roads. I don't believe, Sean, right, we can have an access road in the setback, correct? That has to be clear.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to hear confirmation. So
Yeah.
for the
Typically you can't, but you know, with a larger project, I don't know if they make exceptions for that for fire roads and whatnot, but it'd be tight. Can you slide up to the other slide, Sean, that shows where we, yeah, this one I kind of straightened out the early childhood center. I'll note, and I meant to study this and I kind of ran out of time this week. It was a crazy week, and the school fits better, obviously, without the early childhood center. If we just did the middle school, you'd have a lot more space on the site to work with. But I think when you compare the leftover green space with this site with what we had shown for Guile Road, obviously Guile Road works better.
So just some context too, Glenn, for people, you know, for the public that hadn't seen this before. So the property that we're looking at, and zoom in a little bit. So the property that we're looking at, Blue Hill Ave, is, you know, down here. Brush Hill Road is up here. And this is basically the adjoining two parcels. So the layout that you were looking at is basically the 6.8 acre parcel that's on the bottom portion of this. So what we did is, just for presentation purposes, again, for the public that's joining, we took that, enlarged it down here a little bit. What you see is the upper parcel, which is approximately 3.8 acres, and then the lower parcel at 6.8 acres. The yellow hatching that you see on the side is essentially the 50-foot zoning buffer on each side. The lower parcel is approximately 700. The lower parcel.
The other one with this site,
Yep.
the other thing with this site is you're almost gonna have to have a through road from Blue Hill Ave to Personal Road.
Yep.
Because to bring a road all the way around the school just eats up too much space, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things that's on here that's not shown, you know, so just kind of finish the overview of like the yellow hatching that you see here is that 50-foot zoning buffer. So it equates out to about 37,000 feet on one side and 47,000 feet on the other side, which essentially reduces the parcel from, you know, 6.8 acres down to 4.8 acres. So the green portion that you see here is the buildable portion of the lot that we're looking at. The other thing that comes up too, you know, for this layout that you're showing here, Glenn, it assumes a flat lot, right?
Which it's
So-
not.
Correct.
Yeah, we didn't. Ideally, Sean, we would do, on top of this study, we would do a 3-dimensional section through the site to show how this building would have to mass on the site. And obviously, if we pursued this site, we would take it to that level. But you're right, that right now, you'd have some ramping at the very least going on inside the building for it to work in this site. Or you would have to cut out a large amount of the site with retaining walls to make it work.
Yep. And then the other thing that.
A site section would really probably help the argument that this doesn't work.
Okay. So the other one that's not shown on here too, and I'll stop sharing my screen now. I just got to find it. Is the you know, for the conceptual layouts that DRA did at their site. There's no bus turnarounds. There's no parking lots. There's no playgrounds. So this is just a straight, you know, structure building on a lot with none of the accessory things that we'll need.
I erased the chunk because, like you said, it doesn't fit. Like the way they had it laid out wouldn't fit on the site.
Is
It
there
would have to be relooked at how we would do circulation through the site.
Glenn, is there a general rule of thumb that you use for laying out a school on a site for circulation that
You know, like when you're laying out in a building, you have certain amount of space you have to assume is circulation. So for a site to cover parking, access roads and playgrounds. Any idea?
There
what that-
is, and I don't have that information off the top of my head, but I would bet that DRA has that information in their report somewhere. We can dig that up.
Yeah, it's, and
Curious.
just so everybody's aware, I
Probably
did,
like 40%
yeah,
at least.
of the overall site for
Yeah.
that stuff. And that's, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'll pull up the DRA one, but I did reach out to DRA. Showed them the lot, said, you know, could you give some just high level feedback to us? Because Carl Franceschi from DRA has done that a number of times for us. He just hasn't got back to me. So
Okay.
if I do hear back from him on anything, I'll share it with everybody in the committee. I'm just gonna take a minute, Glenn, I'm just gonna find that DRA one, just give me 1 second, so I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, the other thing to start the site while Sean's talking is, and I think we touched on this the last meeting. From a Mass Architectural Access Board standpoint and an ADA standpoint, this site would be very difficult to work with. Because all sidewalks leading up to the entrance would need to be accessible, and that's going to be tough on this site as it currently stands. We would have to do some serious site work to make it work.
And Glenn, did you look at it with both lots or just the one?
I looked at it with both lots in mind. But the second lot doesn't really do anything to alleviate the issues. It would, I think the second lot would allow for parking, it would allow for some circulation help, that kind of thing, but it wouldn't help with the building.
What about for a through road too, though? You could, if you.
Well, the through road, I think it would, in my opinion, quick study, I think the through road would almost have to happen to make the site work. I don't think we could fit, we would need a fire access around the building. We don't necessarily need a building. We don't necessarily need a road around the building. So I think cutting a road straight through would help with alleviate some of the site issues and open up some of the space.
Thanks, Glenn.
And Mark, you talked to the historical commission, right? About
Yeah.
the structures. Can you talk a little bit about that just one?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the upper lots, right, has two buildings that are on the historical register. So I talked to the Milton Historical Commission as well as the Massachusetts Historical Commission. And essentially have some high level takeaways. The first is if the town were to purchase the lot with the historical houses, there is no legal restriction that would prevent the town from destroying the historical properties on town-owned land. If the town wanted to, the town could, tear down the buildings pretty quick. That said, the Milton Historic Commission views the properties as having significant historical value and would be thinks their potential loss would be met with significant backlash. They recommended that we do everything possible. And when I say they, let me be clear. I mean, Steve, I think it's O'Donnell. I'm not wrong. Yeah, Steve O'Donnell. This is a gentleman I spoke with. He suggested we do everything possible to avoid demolition because of the historical value of these things. Also mentioned that, he talked to the Milton Historical Commission group and provide a statement to the SBC, basically stating that feeling. That's something he expected they put together sometime this summer when they next meet. In conversation with the Mass Historic Commission, I talked to Jen over there. They additionally viewed the properties, especially the Tucker House, as having significant historical value. They did say that the MHC does have regulatory oversight of any construction project. So while we could tear them down, it would just create a lot of more steps involved in that kind of the construction of anything on the site, because we would have to show alternatives analysis to moving, to destroying them, the timeline or costs potentially to move the buildings. All of these things just adds complexity, time, and cost to the project if the project were to involve the upper lot. Yeah, and they said the cost generally of moving properties is extremely significant. Usually the only real way that they've seen towns do it successfully is when they offer them up kind of for free and somebody else is willing to take on that cost. But that still involves a lot of hurdles to find folks to take that on, and adds to the timeline. So that was the overall feedback gotten from both those historic commissions. Happy to answer any questions.
So let me just go back to the layout again. What I've done. Just let me know when it pops in, Glenn.
Seeing it, you actually, are you overlaying? Yeah, I see it. Perfect. I mean, yeah, it's,
So just for, for clarity, your layout that's here, this is basically the same one laid on top of it. So scale wise, it's the same. This is one I was working on earlier. So the additional things that I was mentioning there, the playground here, the parking lots over here. Again, I just overlay this for everybody so they can see the additional things outside of the building that are part of the program.
Yeah.
Essentially where we'd have to find room or space for them and create those kind of circulation patterns. The fire
you have to
access
fit
road.
that stuff in, Sean. The adjacencies would be just crazy. Like your parking is going to be half the site away from the front entrance of the building,
Yeah.
What is the so the distance between the building in the Glenn's new rendering and the abutter, the neighbors, right, is essentially just the width of the buffer zone, which is like 50 feet,
50
right?
feet, yeah.
Maybe slightly more if you have a little bit of green there. But if you straighten out the building, I should say. But what is the distance in the previous land swap plan? How far is the building from the
neighbors?
from the
300
closest house?
300 feet.
Yeah, it was like 300 feet, right?
So we're going from 300 to
Call it 100.
75
In their backyard.
Yeah.
And that's on both sides too.
Yeah. The one thing for me is, for this just being, two-dimensional layout, I agree with you, Glenn, almost a section cut through this building to see how those, you stretch. I think what it's going to do is stretch the building out. So, if you have to make ramping work for ADA compliance within the building to get, if you do a tiered building and start stepping it up and you have to get ramps or circulation, up those tiers, I just think it's going to stretch the building even further than what we see here.
It'll add cost too, Sean. You can add that in.
But essentially for it, yeah, I'm just designing while I'm thinking or speaking, which is sometimes gets me in trouble.
Yeah, I just think of all the retaining walls on the
Well,
site. and how
yeah, and
expensive those
Probably
things.
4 or 5 levels of them to
Yeah.
make it work.
They're just
And
very
it just
expensive.
makes it, having to keep that upper lot the way it is too, just makes that even more complicated. It's just, you can redesign the building and change the layout, all those things, but there's, I just think about the cost of the land. You're at 7 million. And then the site work just to try and make this work is going to be really significant dollars.
Yeah.
It's pretty, for me, it's almost a cost prohibitive site.
Mhm.
And just trying to make it work on that site will not be easy if possible.
Yeah, when I look at it too, we're just, blindly taking the Galro program and putting it over there. And I appreciate what Glenn did of straightening out, because, it just makes it, I mean, this is a long, thin site, with a steep grade. So.
I call them bowling alley, Sean.
Yeah,
Bowling alley site.
those are the gutters on the sides, but,
Mhm.
for a building, maybe. Yeah, I mean, and construction or engineering, for me, it's always, if you got the money, we can build anything, right? You know what I mean? Like,
That's why I'm saying it's cost prohibitive, because it's just, it'll be so much more than building anywhere else. And you end up with something that's not great.
mhm.
In your alternative analysis, have you run across the old matrix we used to go through and
Yep.
I'm just wondering if we could apply that to this site? Like there's other things like walkability,
Yeah, it was-
those types of things that are not quite so
They're not visible on the.
construction related, but more just for the
Operational.
common person.
Yep.
Operational, because I think that's how we decided against some properties as well, not just, I mean, I just look at this and I think, wow, look at the basketball court. Can you imagine building that on the pitch that we would, it'd be like,
Yeah.
how's that gonna work? But I know you can, like you said, if you have endless amounts of money, you can build pretty cool things,
Mhm.
but it just feels like a lot of work for very little return. Is it square hole round peg or vice versa? But I do think that that matrix was helpful in not allowing us to spend too much time on
Yeah,
these types of exercises
yep.
as a small group.
Yeah, so just for Mark and Selena, so what we did is initially when we started out looking for land 4 years ago, we developed a matrix of checkboxes or a rating system that we looked at. So we had a number of sites that we came out of the gate with. They were like St. Mary's of the Hills and this and this. And we're trying to weigh which one would be the best, some rating system for it based on all those things. Size of the land, flatness, walkability, everything that was there. And then we used that initially, and I don't think it went anywhere formally or anything
No,
like that.
it was just basically the
Just a,
conversation and
to allow.
to give us a metric to keep it apples to apples
Yeah.
as we were going through each location.
Yeah, so what I can do is I can resurrect that, and then, if we want as a committee, I can send that out. I think the ones that would be comparing, contrasting would be, the Gattle Road. You know what I mean? Because that's essentially our two options right now. So I can do that after this meeting. Yep, Mike?
Thanks, Sean. Are we still going to get something from DRA on this, or was it DRA or no, not DRA? Who was the designer, the kind of pro forma designer?
It was DRA. So I had reached out to Carl initially just to get his, knowing that, between our last meeting and this meeting, they really couldn't do a conceptual design for, what we're doing, but I just wanted to get some feedback from them. I can, we can engage them to do a similar concept design on this. I'm just, part of me is I want to make sure timing wise, we don't spend that money and this thing, passes. When I say
Sean, how much
passes-
money are we gonna spend on something we already know the answer to? We know the site doesn't work. I think we could provide more information to prove it doesn't work, but
And
I'm
Glenn,
just curious. I mean,
Glenn, nothing against that design. I just didn't know if we were going to, see if they had.
no, I know, I understand the question.
Yeah, fair enough.
I could need Sean talked about it a little bit, and we could engage them certainly, and I'm sure they could come up with something, but I don't know. You have more experience with this than I do, Mike, whether that's worth doing or not.
Oh, I don't have any experience with design, so you're the expert.
No, I
on
mean the
that.
political end of it, is this something we need to prove that doesn't work? I don't,
We're the blind leading the blind on the political
Yeah.
side, and we're just kind of feeling our way along, so. But no, yeah, I mean, that's something we need to, I guess, decide.
Yeah, let me just go to Dr. Miranda. She has her hand up, and then I'll come back to that in a minute too. So, Dr. Miranda, you're recognized. Thanks.
Yes, hi, thank you, Sean. I really appreciate sort of seeing this, and Glenn, thank you for sort of taking a stab at it. But I guess I'm wondering, as you were talking about the matrix, sort of the criteria that was utilized in the applying that matrix to the various sites that were looked at, would that give us sufficient information to be able to support our case, right? Exactly to the point that Glenn just said, which is the site doesn't work. But would it allow us to have enough information to be able to make that case, or do we need to do anything else in order to help folks arrive at the same conclusion? Because I think, everything I've heard so far, it doesn't make sense for us to pursue it. And I'm also wondering if we have enough information to answer the question of cost. I know, sort of we've talked about sort of it would be outrageous. It's a lot of money, but how does that compare to sort of the alternative? And the last point, and I don't know, Sean, if this site becomes part of the alternative analysis as well, or is this treated separate from, because it's not a site that we brought forward at town meeting? I just don't know exactly from sort of the community standpoint, how much more information would we need to give them to know that we did our due diligence and had to move on, just like we did from the other sites.
Yep. So I'll start with the last one and work backwards. So, for the alternatives analysis, this one would not be included because it wasn't part of the, the overall leading up to the land swap. So, maybe we could discuss it if it came up, but I don't think it's required. In regards to the, I definitely get the feel from everybody that, the site, doesn't work. But I think, for us, we just need to make sure, we do our due diligence all the way through. So, and Kerry's point, and which I agree with, is if there was a grading criteria that we looked at previously, that we just, dismissed other sites, we might want to just kind of continue that because it was kind of a precedent that we had formally. There are different things. It definitely makes you look at the site a little, differently. The one thing that this site would have, above Gow Road, at least in my opinion, would be time. That if we were to privately purchase this and own it, we could start design and get going a lot quicker. So, I mean, I think those are some of the things that, we really probably should, independently, all of us look at it, rate it, and have that as like a discussion for our next meeting and kind of walk through how we graded it and looked at it comparing to Gow Road. And I think that would give kind of, a framework rather than, some of us just preparing remarks leading up to it. We kind of all be on the same page as we're making those. So, yeah, Mike.
Thanks, Sean. Just a couple of thoughts. I'm not completely sold that it doesn't work. I think that there, a lot of drawbacks has been pointed out. But just a couple of questions. One is it not feasible to swing the parking up into the lot above the school? Does that not work? And maybe there's no answer for it. I just, when I saw the overlay and the parking over there to the right, as I look at it, and the question is, well, can you flip that up and put it into the land up above, right?
Well, that's where it'd have to go, Mike.
Yeah, okay,
There'd be no other place for it to go.
right. And then you're compromising the green space, I guess? Is that the idea?
The green space, the proximity of the parking to the front entrance of the building.
Yep, okay. And
I mean,
then,
like you said, not stuff that couldn't be overcome if we wanted to go that route, but
Yep.
it's
yep,
not ideal.
no, I get it.
Lines.
And then the only other question is, we're putting this square peg into that round hole. And the only question is, if there were an alternative structure, could an alternative structure work, right? This was the Guile Road construct. So would an alternative structure work? The answer may be no, but it's just a thought in my mind, so.
Yeah, I looked at some more squared off middle school plans and they literally don't fit on the site. You'd have to. But yeah, then of course, there's always, like you said, unlimited budget. I could come up with a great modern design for this site and it's built into the hill and it would cost a lot of money though.
That's helpful. That's helpful, Glenn.
Yeah.
So I think the takeaway from what I'm hearing, Mike, I'll talk with DRA. Again, just, to get, see if they can do something high level, similar to what they did for Gow Road, in anticipation of our next meeting. If they have the capacity to do it, by the time that comes around, we'll have funding based on our new school building committee funding as of July. So we'd have funding to be able to do that. And again, just based on their timeline, it might be good to do that. Again, ideally, they could get it done by the end of July. But, for
Do we
us,
have a graded site plan? Because they're gonna need that to do that level of design.
yeah, so what happens is if you go to the Muni mapper for the town, they actually give 1 foot contours on there. So I can do a poor man's grading plan for it by copying and pasting it over, making
Right.
sure it's.
Yeah, no, we can trace over that in CAD to get that info, but yeah, they would definitely need that info to do that kind of study.
Yep. Yeah, because that was, Carl did take that into account. So I'm just recalling the Gow Road property. So the work if you guys recall the drawings that BSC did for the realignment of Gow Road, there were certain slopes to the road that they encountered there, and I think we're at like 4 or 5%.
So we ended up at like 4 and
yeah, because
4.7 or something. We needed to be below 5.
yeah, and that was one of your commentaries on when we looked at the different options that were there with the slopes of the road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the best you could do here is like 6.5, and that's going up the right side of the page,
Mhm.
and then probably cutting across before you get to the historical properties and going north again
Yeah.
out to Brush Hill. And that's still way steeper than you want any road.
Yeah, the unique thing too is, Glenn, if your thoughts are, and again, just while we're, doing open commentary on this, that we're gonna push traffic, school buses, cars and all that up through Brush Hill Road. I know talking to Glenn Pavlicek, like the stone walls up there are historic, so there's,
Right across the
li-
street, 703 is a historic one too.
yeah, so there's like limited stuff we can do to cut through those walls. Turning radiuses on buses, just from the site walk that we did, that road's pretty small. So we'd have to, under that assumption, we'd have to, assume a bus could go through that site, get up to Brush Hill Road, make that turn. And if it can't, then the idea is that it's gonna come in on one side of the property, go around it and come down the other side. And again, that's gonna further, tighten that overall floor plan or that green space that we're looking at with access roads. Yep, Mike?
Yeah, just one other thing, there was some discussion on the sidewalk about there would be no walk to school opportunities with a school like this. It would all have to be bused. Do our school folks see that as the reality here? Or maybe they haven't looked at it yet, but should we assume that this is going to be 100% bust because of the lack of the sidewalk on Blue Hill and the tight road up on Brush Hill?
And there's no sidewalks on Brush Hill either.
Right. So no sidewalks anywhere. So,
Either side, yeah.
yeah, okay. So is it fair to assume there's going to be no walk to school here?
I mean,
wouldn't-
we could build sidewalks on Blue Hill, but it just increases costs and increases time because you got to involve Mass DOT.
That's exactly what I was
And
gonna
get
go.
their approval, that's probably 6 months. Yeah, and then it's just a lot of sidewalk. I mean, it's a long way before you get to anywhere. And then kids are walking along the side of, Blue Hill Ave, which is not a slow moving street. Yeah, that was Glenn's general thought during the walkthrough, was that it was not gonna be a walkable site.
When we give this to DRA, maybe we can give them some of the criteria that we made judgments by to get their opinion on that.
Mhm.
It might be, I'm just taking down some notes of things we might be able to give to them as well, just for their opinion. Location comparison is one of them, whether it's walkable, how does it work for busing and drop off?
Yep.
Like, there's not a lot of space here for a drop off area. Does it work with, what's it look like with the historical buildings?
No, yeah, I mean,
Yep.
And then we probably need their opinion on educational program. The one at Guile Road is it's pretty much one level, but multiple floors. This is probably multiple floors and multiple levels. So educationally, how does that work, and how much might that increase the square footage needed for the building? Because now you've got all those extra stairs and ramps. The building needs to be bigger than the one on Guile Road.
Mhm.
And educationally, you're talking probably longer distances for kids to get to classrooms if they're going across.
Mhm.
And then to be curious, their thoughts on the amenities, playgrounds, parking, that kind of thing, how it fits. And then we're just talking about it, but we're probably talking about 2 traffic lights too. Whereas Guile is 1 traffic light because one already exists.
Mhm.
Here, we're probably adding 2. But we can send some notes over to you, and maybe we could give them some of that.
To framework.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they can give their professional opinion.
Yep.
As a comparison for us too.
Yeah, I think the other one, it just kind of, people have alluded to it a couple times. It's just, well, time wise, like, I agree it'd be quicker to get this. It's almost like look at the overall cost too. So like, the reason for me personally, why I want to address this quicker, one, we can end the school building committee and I can go back to my life. But 2 is the quicker we address this, the cheaper it's going to cost, right? So we have to look at that. However, if this gets done quicker, but the overall construction cost, if it costs more money, is it if time, if time is the only thing that's the reason that we're doing it, to save that cost, but it's an overall more expensive project, then time shouldn't really be factored in. You know what I mean? It's that overall project cost along whatever timeline to look at that.
To me, that relates a little bit to the previous conversation of what is the timeline for the other project, because is it fair to say best case scenario for acquiring this parcel
Mhm.
would be December, the December town meeting, and then we'd have to have a January
Mhm.
election, how much time is gained, I guess, is one of the questions, because I think it, and Mike, is raising his hand and probably understands this well, but way better than the rest of us.
No, I don't understand it any better than you, Mark, but I do think that this is a competitive situation. So I don't think there's any way we can wait until December for a town meeting. When we were talking about it, we were talking about the possibility of, if we're in a competitive situation, trying to get a July or an August town meeting, right? And rolling it up, if we need to do a debt exclusion vote, having an election in September, right? And if we did a P and if we could get the buyer to agree, have a P&S that would be subject to town meeting, and if we need to go to the voters, subject to the voters. So I think my view, and I could be wrong, maybe it's not, but my view is that, the concern is that this is a very competitive situation. We don't have time, if we want to go for this, we don't have time to wait for December town meeting. We got to move a lot faster than that, right? So that was kind of the thought, that if we need to move on this, we need to move because there are other interests out there that might want this property and put other things on it.
So more of, just from a school building committee, Mike, relationship or recommendation to, you and the select board. Are you guys looking essentially for us to, vote whether we, think this would be, I'm just trying to figure out at our end game, what would the select board be looking for us for, like a recommendation that it should be bought, purchased for a school or not be purchased for the school, as part of all these exercises that we're doing.
Oh, yeah, I don't think you need to, well, definitely on the positive side, right? Definitely, it's no different than any other action that this committee wants taken, right? You recommend it to this, we recommend it to the select board, right? Whether this board would, I guess this committee would probably want to advise the select board that it doesn't, if that's a decision, that it doesn't recommend moving forward with this. Because there may be, who knows, there may be other interests in town that want to buy it for the town, right? And again, it's a competitive situation with the private sector, so we're doing that. So I guess I'd say if this committee wants to recommend it, absolutely, it's no different than anything else. We recommend that this is the site. We recommend that to the select board to move forward on it. And then probably because of the nature of it, it's probably good to advise the select, because we're looking into it, probably be good to advise the select board once a determination is made, even if it's a negative, right? So so people aren't wondering, right?
Yep. Any other commentary? I think Tim joined us too, Tim Lombard, so we can on the Russell.
Yeah, I did finally get on. I'm sorry, Sean. I got held up at work, so I just figured I'd jump on and try to follow the conversation. Sorry for my tardiness.
No, all good. Just making sure Tim L was you. That's all. All right. Hearing no other thing, I think the last thing on our agenda is to adjourn. So entertain the motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the school building committee meeting on June 21st.
All right. Second.
Second.
All right, let's do a roll call vote. Let's start here. Scott?
Yes.
Yes. Mark?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman?
Yes.
Dr. Miranda?
Yes.
Mike Zulus?
Yes.
And Tim Lombard?
My first official act of the day. Yes, thank you.
Sean O'Rourke, yes. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.